learning from your mistakes is a massive part of improving as a 40k player. Now, this week we're going to be continuing our series on how to become a better 40k player. Lewis and I are going to be going over what we consider is our top 5 mistakes that we see players making time and time again, and it's what's truly holding them back from being much better players. And I think these mistakes, we're probably all guilty of at least one of these, and if you're aware of it, you can massively up your game and you can overcome these things. Now, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and let's dive straight in.
Hey guys, welcome to D6 Evolution. I'm Lewis, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 mistakes that are holding you back from being a better 40k player. I'm here with Andy.
Hey guys.
If you haven't watched us before, we're a YouTube channel that focuses on tactics for 40k and competitive play predominantly. Go check out some of our other tactics videos. We cover a breadth of topics, and today we're really going to be summarising them into our top 5 list. So, you ready to start, Andy?
This is going to be great. This is a topic I'm really psyched about. So, should we take it away, buddy? Do you want to take off? What is your top mistake that you see people making?
I think we've got to start with not playing the mission.
Yes.
We've covered this quite extensively, and we're going to continue to do it because it is absolutely the most important thing in the game. A lot of people just start rolling dice, want to kill stuff, and really you don't win game by rolling dice. You win games by playing the mission and winning the victory points. So how would you approach this? What is your sort of top of the list there in terms of playing the mission?
Absolutely. So this is a concept that I've come across quite recently, actually, and that is actually... Before you even start rolling dice, think, how do I win this mission? Mm-hmm. How do I lose this mission?
Yep.
And how does my opponent win?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That last one's really key, actually, and we'll come on to that into another point. But just starting with the first two, then.
Yeah. So say if it's the standard end of game objectives you're playing, right? Mm-hmm. So what you need to do there is you need to have a unit on each objective at the end of the game. So you need to keep your OBSEC alive. So how do you keep your OBSEC alive? Maybe you keep it in reserve. Maybe you just keep it out of line of sight to the last turn. If that is your only win condition there, then that's all you need to do. You need to concentrate your whole game plan around surviving.
Yeah. I've got a really good example from a game I just played yesterday, in fact, and my friend will recognise this. He was playing a very killy list, had some flyers. It was Jakari and an Eldar list. Had some flyers, had some Talos, had some Grotesque, but he also had 3 Venoms, each with 5 Cabalites in it and a Blaster in each. Now, the thing is, that's how he's going to win the game, right? Those Cabalites objectives secured. They can go miles with their Venoms. They can fly up to 16 inches, and he needs to use those to take objectives later on in the game. But his problem was he had a blaster in them, so he wanted to play them aggressively. So he flew them out to try and fire the blasters off, lost those units, and then he didn't really have an ability to win the game off the back of that. So that's exactly what we're talking about here: is understanding how you're going to win the mission and retaining the units that you need to keep alive in order to be able to win the mission.
Yeah, and absolutely. And guys, if you play ITC, this goes even further. So when you step up to the table, you think your secondaries, right? What secondaries can I max out? And when your opponent chooses a secondaries, you've got to think, how do I deny his secondaries? A really good player, Manny Chima, he took a unit of Bulgarins to the last ITC tournament. And as soon as someone took gangbusters on that unit, he'd hide them in a building at the back of the board, immediately denied his opponents 4 points.
Yeah. Oh, what a great example that is, because that's
and
a unit
he chooses
you want
engineers on that unit, right? So he immediately gets 4 points. So that's an 8-point swing in that game, and that probably won him every single one of those games that he won was purely because he maxes out engineers and he denies 4 points from his opponent because your opponent can't score them on anything else. And Bulgarin sitting in a ruin out of line of sight, they're not dying to anything.
No, exactly. I mean, that's just a perfect example of what we're talking about there, because normally a normal player would go, right, I've got my Bulgrim, they're my bully unit, I'm going to charge them up, they're going to be attacking, and then your opponent takes that and you go, okay, well, I'm still going to do it anyway, that's how I'm going to win the game. Yeah. So, this is exactly what we're talking, understand the mission.
So Manny had pretty much won those games before he even started, just by doing that. Now, the second thing you can do in ITC is go, right, what is my list good at? Am I holding more? Am I killing more? Because usually you're not going to be doing both.
Yeah.
Not at the start of the game anyway. So if you're playing against Imperial Knights, they're probably going to be dominating the middle of the board. Yeah. So, and then you've got to think, right, can I kill more from the chaff he's brought along for a couple of turns? You've got to think, are you going to be holding more? Are you going to be killing more?
Well, if I can take the killing more for a second, one thing I like to do, I've been playing a lot of the Derridios. I think they're the best unit in the game at the moment. And I've got the Greater Havoc launchers on them, which is 48 inches, no line of sight, and really good at killing chap units. I can pretty much guarantee myself that 2 Derridios firing will pick up a 10-man guard squad or a Venom or something like that. Now, the thing is, if you're playing for the kill more, you don't necessarily want to get the kill more right at the beginning of the game if you already secured it. So if I killed 2 or 3 units in the first game, but I haven't fired my Greater Havoc launches, I'm not going to bother shooting something like the 10-man guard squad in that turn because I've already got my kill more. So even though I could kill them, and it's nice to kill stuff in the game, I might leave them alive for another turn or 2, so I can definitely get kill more in the following turns, turn 2, turn 3, and onwards. So it's really playing the mission as going, okay, well, I won't kill that this turn. That'll be my kill more for turn 2 or for turn 3. So you're playing the mission, not just playing to kill as much as you can in the first turn.
Because actually, just killing things by itself doesn't get you many points, does it?
No. And sometimes you want to leave stuff alive. I mean, if you take a guardman squad down to the last model, but you've already got your kill more and they're not holding the objective, leave that model. Like, come back for it. That's an easy kill later on in the game. Like, he's not going to do anything. If you've got Butcher's Bill
or something else like that, you need your 2 units a turn. So, yeah.
And I think the easiest piece of advice I can give to this, to kind of wrap this point up, is to look at the start of the turn, look at your score sheet, what you're trying to do. I mean, we're talking about ITC here, which is becoming very prevalent these days, but obviously you've still got the book missions, and understand what in that turn you need to do to score the most victory points you can, particularly in progressive missions, and plan out from that stage and go, right, okay, how do I win the mission? How am I going to get my victory points? And once you determine that, then your whole game plan falls around that, right? I've got to move this unit here because I need to hold that objective. I've got to move this unit here because it's got to be able to see to kill that model which is on that objective. So you plan it out from looking at your score sheet at the start of the turn.
Yeah, I think it's massive. I think if you're going to take 1 point from this whole video that we're doing, I think you should take more than one. But you can take one. This is it. Play the mission.
Play the mission.
So,
all right. So the second one is a very large topic. We've covered it a few times, and we still don't think we've broken the back on it. And that is screening. Everyone knows to screen, but do you really know what screening is? Yeah. Do you know all the different scenarios in which screening is applicable, and what you need to be doing in those different scenarios? And a big thing you can talk about in screening is the deep strike screening as well, because that's one type of screening, and obviously the other type of screening is screening against units that are trying to charge you, and also even just screening shooting units, so they can't, like a big knight, if you can move block him, that's effectively a form of screen as well, so that he can't get onto the targets he needs to shoot. But if you start talking about that, one thing you've got to be careful of is talking about sacrificing your screens and giving that up too early. And Andy, I know you're very prevalent at this. So do you want to take us through it?
So this is massive. This is absolutely massive right here. So it's basically about the timing of your screen. If you wanted to summarize everything that Lewis said just there, it's timing of your screen. So when do you need it? And that's all about knowing your opponent. So are they going to be deep striking against you turn 1? Are they going to be
very
deep striking?
Very few can do that.
Yeah. So, there's a few things like slam captains and stuff, and, Zangors, stuff which starts on the board. Are they going to be deep striking you against you turn 2? Will you need it for turn 3? Okay.
Exactly.
So when you're planning out your screen, if you don't need it turn 1, don't stick it out in the open where it's going to be. Isn't that right, buddy?
That is such a hallmark of a good player, is when you wrap up to the board at the start of the game and they start deploying, particularly in one of those situations where they deploy their whole army and then you deploy your whole army. And if they've got all of their screens laid out and deep striking everything at the start of the game, you can look at that and go, okay, well, they've pretty much given their game plan away, right? I know exactly where all their screens are, I know exactly where everything is, and you can play against that. But a hallmark of a good player is that everything will be hidden, like a guard squad, for example, which is a typical screen, might be like clumped up behind a ruin so they can't be shot. And it might be somewhere in the middle of the board, so you could think, oh, geez, they could move over to the left, they could move over to the right. I don't know where their screen is, because turn 1, there's no point in that being out there. For most deep strikers, you come down turn 2. So. Yeah,
because what you're doing as a deep strike army is you're clearing their screens turn 1, and if they're out of line of sight, that's you can't
really
do that.
Hard.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Very few
out of range,
Yeah.
out of line of sight. But the important thing here is that you keep your screen in range from where it needs to be. Turn 2, turn 3.
And actually, if we pick up on that point, that's what it makes it really tricky. And that's why people like to put it out at the start of the turn, because when in the deployment phase, because they go, right, it's here, I know it's here, I know it's protected, I know what it's doing. It's much more hard to keep that and know that it can get to that location. So you're almost using it as a bit like a crutch, and a good player will exploit that because you give your game plan away, as we've described.
Yeah, so the other thing to think about is actually don't deploy all your screen at once if you don't need it. Because remember, a lot of armies, like if you screen out turn 2, they don't need to drop turn 2, they'll drop turn 3.
Yep, exactly.
So they'll kill your screen turn 2. So keep some of it in reserve if you can. So just think, right, this is my screen for turn 2. These units are being held back, so this is my screen for turn 3. And then I don't need a screen after that. It's fine.
Yeah. And it depends on what you're screening with as well. If you're screening with like a 10-man guard squad and you're playing against a very shooty Tau list, or maybe not a Tau because it's not going to deep strike against you, but something with a lot of shooting in it, then you can pretty much expect that the turn that you get that screen out is probably going to dissipate, because your opponent's going to look at that and go, well, I have to kill that this turn. Like, that's the only objective. That's the only thing I can do. So yeah, it's if you're deep striking with planes, for example, or I used to do it with the Plague Burst Crawlers, those screens are going to last a few turns, so actually maybe you can get them out a bit earlier.
But it's what you're screening with, essentially. Yeah. So I think the next thing to consider, and this is just as big here, guys, this is huge, is considering what you're screening against.
Yeah.
Do you want to take it away, buddy? Because you've got some strong thoughts on this, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. So if you're screening against like a 30-man bloodletter bomb with 3d6 charge, then your screen that's only a few inches away from your juicy targets is not going to do much, because they can charge like 15 inches and get in there and wrap around and then pile in and consolidate. So you really want to maybe have a lot longer distance away from that.
Well,
if you're screening...
But I was going to say, it depends what you're trying to achieve with that screen. So... For example, with those bloodletters, if their juicy target, which they need to kill, is, if you only actually need to screen out that against 3 inches. Yeah. Because then, even though they've got a 3d6 charge, they can't kill the thing, which is over 12 inches away.
Yeah, although they can wrap around the side. So
they can pin it in combat.
Yeah.
So that leads me on to the second thing, that if you've got something which necessarily you don't want to be tagged in combat, so like your Derridio is apparently the best unit in the game.
Yeah, by far.
So
you play with someone, you'll tell me that's exactly true.
Yeah. So for that example, you want to screen out much further, because you don't want those being tagged, because that's the important thing about those.
Yeah. So it was what you're screening for and what you're screening against is really important. A good thing, for example, is the Smash Captain. So obviously, that you play a lot of the Smash Captains. If your screen is going to allow them to fight twice and pile into your second target once they kill the first thing, you've got to be really considerate of that as well. But you don't need a lot of distance in order to stop that happening. You only need a 3-inch, just over a 3-inch to 4-inch gap in order to cover that. So it's really important to be considerate of your opponent's list and what you're playing against. One thing that I like to do as well in deep strike screening is really dictate your opponent's movement. You should know where you're giving them the opportunities to deep strike, and where, as much as possible, that really should be limited to maybe one area. So you can pretty much, with most armies, you should be able to cover the majority of the deployment zone and maybe push out a little bit as well. So you dictate to your opponent, the only place that you can drop is right here, because I've deep strike screen here and here and here in my backfield and everything like that. So that's the only place you can come down. Once you've done that, you've dictated that that's where they have to drop, then that's where they're going to drop. So then, you can play your next turn knowing that in the following turn they're going to come down right there. If you're not doing that, if you've got lots of holes in your deployment phase and there's 4 or 5 places they can drop down, you're totally at liberty to your opponent to determine where they want to drop, and that gives them all the power. Yeah. So I think deep striking deep strike screening is really important to dictate the flow of the game. Yeah,
exactly, because they drop in one specific place, maybe they assault something, but then you have your counter assault unit sitting right behind, so you're fully prepared for what they're about to do.
Yeah, and taking that one step further, what I like to do is create perhaps 2 areas. One area that I'll really heavily deep strike screen. So, for example, if I'm playing 3 Derridios, I might put 2 over the left-hand side of the board, 1 over the right-hand side. I really weight down the left-hand side with deep strike screens, really push it out, really make it really difficult to get so it's really far away from where you're going to be dropping in and charging. The other area, I'm not going to be able to do that. I don't have enough models or units. So maybe that's a little bit weaker. Maybe there's just 1 squad of cultists which are going to die pretty pretty quickly. But I'll determine that you have to drop over there. You'll kill that squad of cultists. You may get into the Derridio. You may even kill it. But after that, you're doing nothing because the whole rest of my army is over the other side of the board. So there's so much play in deep strike screening and in screening in general to dictate where your opponent goes. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of just thinking, oh, when I'm trying to castle up and maybe I just put a screen out here and that will do. It's like, no, this how and where you screen is going to dictate the flow of the game, and that's the difference between being a great player and being an okay player.
Yeah. And one thing I'd say, if you're struggling at doing this, and this is something Lewis taught me actually because he's really, really good at deep strike screening, is
I've had enough practice against it, I guess.
it's actually, guys, just set up a table and just practice how you're going to screen. Get a 9-inch measuring stick and just measure out how you screen with an elite army, and you'll be surprised. You do not need much at all to do it. You can zone out most of the board easily.
Yeah, I mean, when I was playing that Don Houston's list, which obviously I've taken a lot from to become my new list, there's only like, I don't know, 9 or 10 models and 9 or 10 units, but I can deep strike zone over 3/4 of the board with those models. 3 Derrideos at the back, 9-inch from the corner, 9-inch from the corner, 1 in the middle, pretty much covers the whole back end. And then in front of that, 3 plague burst coolers, and that covers up to, the entire of the deployment zone. And then 3 flyers fly out in front of it and do the exact same thing, and you've got 3/4 of the board covered.
Yeah.
So it's
that was really impressive. Yeah. So I guess if we were going to summarize that, I'd say know when you need your screen, know what you need it for. If it's purely for assault and they're not going to tie you up, you probably only need a 3-inch screen. If you need to stop a unit getting in your backfield, then you need to zone out the whole area. Leave them a gap if you're feeling cheeky and you want to try and bait them into going into a particular area. And watch out for particularly that double fight when they can come in and tag your units.
Yeah,
that is absolutely massive.
Let's just finish on that point then to say that always be remembering the double fight, because you'll put your screen down, that unit will charge in, munch up, let's use the bloodletters, charge in, munch up that cultist screen, pile in, consolidate 3 inches forwards, activate again, pile in 3 inches forwards, and then boom, it's straight. You tagged that unit behind. So you get a lot of movement out of that if you can kill that first screen. So always be cautious of that.
And I think finally with the deep striking, the last thing to consider a shooting deep strike threat is that say for obliterators, for example, 24 inches. Now, if you can zone out of 24 inches, which is actually really, really easy to do, you just need to push some scouts or something forwards. You completely nullify that threat. So think about the threat range of the weapons which are coming down, particularly if they're short range. You can actually stop your opponent from actually having any effect on your target. Sure, he can shoot your screens, but he can't shoot the important things.
Yeah, and just remember that's really why they decided to keep with the turn 2 deep strike, because it gives you a turn to affect the game in that way. It gives you a turn to push out, move the other units back. You might deploy right on the edge, and then they take their first turn. Then you have your go, and you go, okay, you know what? I need to move my screening units forwards. I need to use my juicy targets they're going to shoot back, and then I can defend against that deep strike zone. Because if you don't have a turn in order to do that, then you really are at liberty. You can be quite compact deployment zones. It can be quite tricky to zone off properly, and that's why things like Zangors and anything that can deep strike turn 1 or can get into combat turn 1 is really, really powerful right now, because you don't have the ability to spread out and to get some board control and to get that distance which you sometimes need with those screening units. So.
And I think there's one other thing to say here is that, guys, and this is going back to the first point, if you do not need to deep strike screen, do not deep strike screen. Just stop doing it. Like, the amount of times I see people pushing their scouts out to the middle of the board, and like if I was playing Custodies, that's a nice little speed bump for me. You accelerate over them by charging them, and then or you pin them in combat so you can't be shot. So a deep strike screen can work against you as well as for you, and it's just knowing when you need to use it, and it's absolutely massive. If you do that mistake against an assault army, which isn't deep strike screening, you've probably lost the game. That one little mistake there.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
want to dwell on
so
it too
easy
much.
to charge forwards and then just give them something to wrap and not be shot back out, or to give them that extra movement because they get the 2d6 charge and they get the piling consolidate and then they're half at the board. It
just creates so many problems for yourself. So I think let's move on, buddy, because I say we don't want to do too much on any one of these things, but I think there's a lot in that deep striking there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good art. So the next thing then is not being precise. So again, let's just recap. We're talking about mistakes that players are making that are holding them back from being a good player. So not being precise is a really key one. A negative way of it is saying playing sloppy. I like to put a positive spin on it and say not being precise. So it just enforces you to think like, okay, when I'm moving moving a model, where exactly am I moving it to? Why am I moving it there? And what is the effect on it? So a really good example is you move in, I don't know, say you've got a squad of berserkers. They get out of their rhino and they move up 6 inches plus the 3 inch out of the rhino, so they move 9 inches. You move the models exactly where you want them to be, and you measure from the rhino the distance until the charge. So you know, okay, I move my 9 inches, and then I've got a 6 inch charge or a 10 inch charge or whatever it is. And knowing that at the point at which you're deploying them from the rhino is being precise. I'm getting them out and move them in here because it will give them an 8 inch charge or a 9 inch charge. If you know that before you do, you don't move them and then get to the charge phase and go, all right, how far is it? Oh, geez, it's 10 inches. Oh, I'm not going to make that. Yeah. Or I thought it was going to be 8 inches. I thought it was going to be an easy one.
But it also makes a cleaner game as well. And it's important that, I sometimes measure some of my opponent's stuff as well. Maybe in my turn to go, okay, if he gets out of his rhino to there, right, he's going to need a 9 inch charge.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move my guys back so it's an 11 inch charge. Right, I'm okay with those odds.
Exactly. And you agree it as well. So, I mean, when people say playing by intent, that's what they're talking about, right? Is that I'm moving this here because I intend for the fact for you to have an 8 inch charge or a 10 inch charge. And then you agree, and then you know that's the only thing to do. So that's what's being precise is doing things for a purpose and knowing exactly what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can quickly talk a little bit about being precise. When people start pushing models around the table, I think, you don't think it matters for that turn. But 3 turns on, when you need that objective to win the game, and
you're just out.
And you roll you need a 5 on your advance to get on that. But you've been messing around, pushing your models here and there, half the distance or twice the distance they were meant to be. Yeah, it matters. It matters hugely, but it just didn't matter on that turn. So,
another example, just to put it into perspective, would be perhaps if you're holding a point with, I don't know, I'd say 10 cultists, and you want to string them out a little bit to get some rerolls or whatever it is that you're doing, and maybe you've got like 3 models on the point. Well, you think you've got 3 models on the point. You haven't measured it. You just chuck 3 models that seem to be within 3 inches. And then your opponent comes in and all of a sudden he puts 3 objective secured models on that point as well, because that's all he can just about reach with his movement. And you realize you didn't have 3, you actually had 2 because you didn't measure them. You just thought they were within range. Yeah. You put that, when you go to put those there, you measure each one and go, right, guys, just so you know, I've got 3 models. I can't get the 4th, so 3 models are holding this objective. Do you agree? Yes, okay. And then you know that I'm holding that with 3 models. And that it's about providing yourself information. Being precise is about providing you with information. I know I've got 3 models. What could he possibly challenge me? Okay, he's got 10 models in that squad. Well, if I can whittle it down to 2 models, then I definitely can take this objective. It's giving yourself the information for which to be more informed to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And I think the other things you can say is, like, when you get onto the fight phase, for example, being precise is massive. I'm base to basing your model. I accidentally left a gap and I didn't say anything. You leave me a gap with my Eversaur Assassin,
I'm going to exploit it.
It's going to be massive. And you get the amount of people who go, oh, I thought I base to base you. It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't think about it. You're only saying that now because you know what I'm about to do to you, which is wrap around, bounce off different units, double fight. I'll end up somewhere completely different, be on an objective, The amount of shenanigans that can happen once you've finished moving your models, it's like in chess, once you let go of that piece, that's the end of your turn, right? So it's the same in Warhammer. Once you move your models and it's your opponent's turn, you can't go back and, oh no, I meant to base him. No, if you were being precise, you would have base to based him, and you would have said, I'm base to base to him, and that's what being precise is. Another, just to finish off on this point, another thing is if you've got like a character and a unit. So say you're deep striking with, I don't know, like a Chaos Lord and some Raptors, just for example. If you charge with the Raptors first, clearly you don't want the Lord to take the Overwatch, so you move the 5 Raptors up. But if you don't leave space for that Chaos Lord to come in, he can't get into that charge. If you create a nice line in front of you with like less than an inch gap between the 5 models, he's going to have to make a much longer charge to come around the side. So if you're being precise, you either leave the gap or you move them over to the side and you leave yourselves to get in. Because the worst thing you do is you declare your charge, they roll the Overwatch, you move your models in, and then you go to do the next one. Your opponent goes, well, no, you can't fit him in because you haven't left the space to get him through. And your opponent's totally right there. It's going to be a bit arsey, sort of, not very much sportsmanship, but that's totally is the rules. And it's the same with just general movement around the board. You've got big squad of plague bearers and you want to get like a rhino through. Well, you can't because your plague bearer is in the way. So you've really got to be careful about that. And if you're precise, you'll give yourself the space and you'll think about that. And then you won't leave yourself up to someone who's being a bit arsey, but is totally in the right. And really, you should concede to that point. Yeah, I think on the bottom tables you get away with it, but as you start moving up into the top tables, and you're like, mate, it's your own mistake. You've got to own it at that point, and
Exactly.
I'm totally down with that.
Yeah,
You
and
have
that's
to
the
own
same
your
in
own mistakes.
deployment. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Like, if we're not talking about the bottom or middle tables, we're talking about someone who wants to become a really great player. Well, a really great player won't do that to themselves because they know that that's not the rules. That's not how it works. You screw yourself over. And the reason that's really important to a lot of people, as I said, would think that's unsportsmanship or arty. The truth about it is that that's going to dictate the game flow. Your opponent might have done something so that unit can only go there so that he blocks your rhino from getting through.
Yeah.
He might have forced that upon you. You can't then be like, oh, I meant to them to move out the way. It's like, well, no, I made a move so that they had to be there. So, that's what happens at higher level competitive play, and you just have to accept it. A biggest mistake people do this is in deployment. They put all their models out, they just deploy in a nice barrier, and then they want to move this model first before that one because they want to see how far they get the advance on, for example, to keep it with the characters. And it's like, well, no, you can't move through. You've got to move that front model first, that first front unit first, and then the other one, and that would completely change how your advance rolls or whatever's going to happen off the back of it. So you have to be precise.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge thing.
You'll hold yourself to a higher account, and then you'll be a better player because of it. You won't play so sloppy.
Okay, so I think it brings on nicely to the next thing. Hit me with the next one, buddy. What have we got?
Yeah, this for me, this is one of my favourite ones. This is mitigating chance in the game, and it covers a few different topics. So it covers playing over aggressively. It covers playing high risk, high reward, which is slightly different to being playing aggressively. It covers not playing defensively, which again is slightly different as well. And it's just mitigating chances in terms of not taking dodgy dice rolls when you don't need to, not going for that 3-inch advance because you think you've got a re-roll, to get onto objective. Just make sure you're there in the first instance, So it covers a breadth of topics. Why don't we take the high risk, high reward one first, because that's probably the easiest thing to understand. Got any examples of high risk, high reward, Andy?
No, everything I do is completely safe.
High risk, high reward. That's the only way to play. That's how I win every game.
Yeah.
I just always win the high risk, high reward roll.
We were discussing this beforehand, and my opinion was, you've got to know when to take risks. Lewis has got a slightly different opinion. Is actually, I think when you're on the back foot, sometimes you feel like you need to take risks when you probably don't. Because actually, if you start playing the game through, you'll probably get more chances. Because it is a dice game and things go either way, don't they?
Yeah, so this is my thought process on it, and I've started to hold myself to this account. Previously, I would definitely have considered myself to be a high risk, high reward player because it's everyone can understand it, right? And everyone goes, okay, well, if I and I used the example of charging my Demon Prince in against a knight with 1 wound, for example. You go, okay, my Demon Prince is nice protected behind my units. It's not going to die, and maybe it's my Warlord as well, for example. If I can kill that knight, I'm going to have a big swing in the game. And if you're losing, it's a really easy mentality to be like, well, I've got to do high risk, high reward. It's the only way I can get back into the game. So you find yourself, charging that Demon Princess that night. It's only got 1 wound. I'm definitely going to kill it. It's high risk because if I don't, he's going to kill my Demon Prince and he'll be exposed next turn. But it's a high reward. I do kill it. I killed the knight and I'm really going to be back in the game. And everyone thinks like that, so we don't need to discuss that mentality or that strategy. What I want to talk about is the fact that if you are a player that's looking to improve and you consider yourself to be okay, you know the rules and you've watched our videos and you've got some good tactics and tricks up your sleeve, you transition to be a great player because you have a better game knowledge and better experience. Well, if you are understanding of yourself to know that, okay, maybe I'm not the best player in the world, then you probably appreciate that you're probably not the best judge of of what risk is and what the reward will be. So you'll find yourself leaning on the crutch of high risk, high reward way more than you should do. So you're probably a bad judge. And that's natural. As I say, I'm a bad judge of it. So just every time you catch yourself going, right, I've got to do a high risk, high reward to get back in the game, just say no to yourself. Just say, no, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'll find another way. I'll find something else that's maybe a little bit lower risk. I'll find another foothold in the game and I'll clamber back into it in a different way. I won't just give the entire game up on one roll because I thought that was going to win me the game. Because the nature of high risk, high reward is that sometimes it plays off, but more often than not it doesn't. And if you keep doing it, you're going to be losing those games every time it doesn't, when there's probably some other way back into the game. So my advice is, just don't ever take a high risk, high reward. Just play, 10, 20 competitive games in tournaments, and every time that comes up, just say no and see if you can win. And I think you'll find yourself posting better results as a result.
Yeah. I think the next thing to come on with this whole mitigating chance is quite literally that. So 40k is a dice game, and there is a certain element of chance in the fact that dice are random. So don't give yourself more opportunities for randomness in the game.
Yeah.
So things like don't accidentally be in deny ranges. Okay?
Yeah, that's a great.
If you've got something crutch psychic power, just make sure you're outside of their deny range.
Yeah, I mean that is just. I mean, if you can take some basic things away, some of the stuff we're discussing here is quite, to really understand and improve as a player. Something's very easy. Take away from this segment is just when you're about to move your psyker in the psychic phase, look at what can be in deny range and just don't move into deny range. It's the easiest thing. A lot of players make that mistake is they just move forwards, they do what they want to do, they get in range of the psychic powers, and they go, "Oh, have you got any denies?" If you're asking, "Have you got any denies?" phase, you've already screwed it up. You should ask that in the movement phase, and then move your psychers away if you can.
Absolutely.
To not be in denial. There's just no point in giving them.
It shouldn't be a question. You go, "Oh, do you?" No.
If you're asking that question in the psychic phase, then you need to improve. You should ask that question in the movement phase.
So going on to the shooting phase, the next thing that I see people doing is basically not overcommitting to what they're going to kill.
Yeah.
So going back to point one where I said 40k is not a killing game.
Yeah.
Make sure you kill something.
Well, sometimes it is a killing game. And it's actually point one is win the mission. If the mission has kill points in it, then it's a killing game. And it's quite an important part of it. But that also comes to the objectives as well. Killing is often killing stuff off of objectives too.
Yeah. So for example, my old list had 2 fire raptors in it. Yeah. Right. Okay. So maybe you had a lot of shots and a lot of las cannons. So you go, right, I can definitely kill a fire raptor and a half. Or something, maybe you had something shorter range, so you couldn't automatically have killed both of them. So now you can either completely overcommit to killing one fire raptor, okay, or you can try and split your shots between 2 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the way you lose that game is if you don't kill either fire raptor.
Yep.
Okay. So there is maybe a 30-40% chance that you nearly kill both fire raptors.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you kill one, you're in the game still. If you don't kill either of them, then there's a huge chance that's going to do a lot of damage to you.
Yeah, and that scenario comes up a lot in Warhammer. That's one of the main scenarios you find yourself dealing with is, do I have enough to kill the 2 things? And shall I go for, that's high risk, high reward, isn't it? Should I go for the overkill? Or shall I just consolidate, the overkill is consolidating. To consolidate, probably overkill that 1 unit and not do enough damage to the second, but definitely kill that first unit. It's a very common situation in Warhammer. You need to know how to deal with it.
Yeah, and you can mitigate that slightly in the movement phase, where if you're in range of both of your targets, you've got your primary target, which you have to kill, and then you have your secondary target, which it's nice to kill. So you position yourself so that your first unit can shoot one target, your second unit can shoot either of the targets. So then if you kill it with the first unit, your second one can then go on to shoot the next target, and you just keep doing it like that. So you give yourself options, but always be prepared. Even if there's 2 or 3 wounds left on something, if you've got to kill it, just overkill
it. Yeah.
Don't split your shots. If you need to kill something,
yeah,
you put all of the shots into it if you need to kill it. Because you know what? When the dice spike in the wrong direction for you, it's really painful.
I've got a good example of that. So say you've got a tactical marine squad with 10 marines in it, and you've got a havoc squad with 4 las cannons and a sergeant in it, and you've got a rhino that's got 2 wounds left or 3 wounds left, and then you've got, I don't know, a squad of cultists or something, a big squad of 30 that you just want to whittle down. Always shoot the las cannons at the rhino first, because even though the 4 las cannons should definitely kill the rhino, in this example, let's just say it does.
Okay.
Let's just say you're in your mind, you're thinking you are.
Okay.
If you shoot your 4 las cannons at it, and 3 hit and 1 wounds, and then it doesn't make the save or whatever, and then you roll a 1 on the damage, and it's got 2 wounds left, then you're going to really wish that you had that other tactical squad just to fire some bolt guns to see if you can take that last wound. But if you fired the bolt guns first at the the cultist squad or whatever, you don't have them to fire against that rhino should the las cannons not do their job. So what we're talking about here is redundancy. Always make sure you've got some redundancy. You shoot your big guns first at the things, and then if you need to plink that last wound off, you'll be surprised how many times you get a knight down to 1 wound, and a sergeant's bolt pistol does it.
And they feel like a hero at that point.
And they feel like an absolute hero. And
if you can ever
you feel really positive.
Yeah. If you can ever do death by flashlights from Imperial Guardsmen guns, always do that. It just really gets inside your opponent's head.
Absolutely. But if you fired a bolt pistol first at something else just because you think, it's never going to do anything to the knight, so I shoot at something else, and then you have that 1 wound left, you're going to really wish you did it. So this is what we're talking about, mitigating the chance, really. There's no reason to fire them in that order. You should always do it in that order first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Have you got anything else to say about that?
Yeah. I would just be considerate of chance. So everyone knows the experience. A one you got a like a las cannon or a blaster or something, and you roll a dice and you roll a 1, and then you re-roll it and you roll another 1. Like that's a 1 in 36 chance, but that happens more often than not. So if you're moving, and a good example is if you want to move on to an objective, say, and it always comes that you're just 2 inches off that objective. So you think, okay, I'll move 6 inches this way, and then I need to roll a 2 on my advance in order to make it into the objective. You're going to roll a 1. You're going to do it. And then you're going to re-roll it with your re-roll, and you're also going to roll a 1 again. But if you think, it's a 2 up with a re-roll, it's guaranteed, I've got that objective, and you don't factor that into your equation of the rest of the game turn that you're playing, then when you get to the movement phase and you do that and you realize you can't make it onto that objective, you're screwed. So maybe what you should do is do that move first, right? Move that onto that first objective. See if you make the advance roll. See if you get on the objective. And if you roll a 1 and then you re-roll it and roll another 1, then you've got time to reorganize your entire game plan for the rest of the turn. Don't move everything else first and then do that, because you're giving yourself the opportunity for failure.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of other things we can cover in the movement phase there, because it's really important. It's like, do the things which don't require, do the thing which matters first.
Yeah.
Do the thing which, say, Lewis is saying, right, see if you get on that objective. Save your reroll for that one important thing there. So, did you get on that objective? Right, I need that reroll. That's the thing which matters. Second things are your buff ranges, right? If you're moving characters, move them first. Don't shoot all your flyers or your tanks forwards and then go, I need a 4 on my advance actually. This is awkward. I hope I get that, and I've used up my reroll already.
Yeah.
You even if you got it right, at that point, realize you put into the game more chance than was needed.
Yeah, and actually, a good example of that is with the buffing characters. If you've got a unit that you want to move up and you want to keep the character in the unit, it's really tempting to move the unit first because you think, okay, it's a big unit. I'll see if I get a big roll. I really want to get the front of it further forward. So maybe I'll do that first. Oh, I rolled a 5, brilliant. Okay, the unit rolls up there, but then you've got to think, well, where's the back of the unit going to be, and how am I going to get my character back in there? Really, the thing is, you should probably move the character first, see what his movement is, and then move the rest of the unit around it. That way you're not giving yourself the chance where that character can't keep up with the unit, and all of a sudden some flyer comes in and just snipes him out because he's not in the unit anymore. So it's really important that you just consider mitigating the chances of things like that happening.
Yeah, because the thing is, if you over the course of a game, luck spikes both ways, but the more you can remove from the game and the more that it's just purely down to your tactics, if they're good, the better you'll do. Yeah, I think that's it, and it's just creating those situations. You go, I was so unlucky. I needed a 4 there. It's like, why did you need a 4?
Yeah, because you gave yourself that situation, and then you're playing high risk, high reward if you are, and maybe you should have done something else that didn't require that 4-up roll in order to win the game. I'm sure there's probably another 100 of situations you could have put yourself in where that wasn't required. And I think that just comes into maybe the last point on this, which is still in the kind of the same thing of mitigating chance and playing high risk, high reward, and that's just playing overly aggressively. I mentioned at the beginning, using those venoms, flying up to get the blaster shots off. You don't have to pour every bit of firepower you have into turn 1. It is often better to be playing defensively, keep some units back. People consider the first turn to be the most important. I have to get everything out there, I have to shoot, I have to kill. It's like, really, you're just giving up to chance at that point, aren't you? Because if you do really well and you roll really well, you will overpower the opponent and do it. But if you don't, and you play too aggressively, you've got nothing in the tank, you've got nothing in reserve. So oftentimes it's better to keep some units back, see how the game develops. There's 6 or 7 turns in the game, plenty of time for things to change. And if you don't put it all out on the line turn 1, you've got some reserves, you've got some backup turn 2. There is no strategy or war game, or even in real war in the world, where you'd put every single thing that you have into turn one and just go on a suicide Hail Mary. You really are better playing more strategically. And keeping things in reserve and coming out, with a counter punch or seeing how things develop. Mitigate the chance. Keep some cards on your side of the table, so you have some tricks to pull out your sleeve when you need to, and you'll find you'll be playing better.
That's some sound advice there, buddy. Which brings us on to
number 5.
Oh, we did that time.
Which is not considering your opponent's plan.
Yeah.
And so this is interesting. This is definitely a lot more of an intellectual discussion about this. It just comes back to the whole thinking two phases ahead, thinking 2 turns ahead. If you think about chess, chess is not I move this piece. What did that opponent do? Oh, he moved there. Right. Okay, I'll move here. It's no, I move this piece so that my opponent has to do this. Or I see my opponent wants to do that. Let's see if I can do something to counter that, or whether I give him up on that. And I think too many people just rock up to the table. They might even have a general plan about how they want their mission to go. I've got to kill that unit. That's really important for me. I've got to be over there. That's really important for me. I don't think at any point they go, what is my opponent trying to do? What units of mine does he want to kill? And if you're not considering what your opponent's going to do, you're just playing reactively. Yeah. You really have to be playing proactively in Warhammer.
Yeah. And if you want a clue what they're trying to do, look what secondaries they took.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's
he needs recon every
ITC.
turn. He needs needs behind enemy lines. If you're not playing ITC, what's his mission plan? Goes back to the first point. How do I win? How do I lose? How does he win?
Yeah, and actually that goes from the macro, the strategic over the course of the game. How do they win? Right down to the tactical decisions. If I put this model out, let's just talk about removing models. So he's deep striked here. I've got my screen here, but he's shooting my screen to get a couple of kills on perhaps. Do I want to remove the model that's closest to him to make that deep strike further away? Probably I do. In most cases, that would be what you want to do. But sometimes your opponent actually doesn't really want to get into combat, but he wants the opportunity to get into combat. So if you leave that model there and start moving it from the other place, you're forcing him to go, okay, maybe I should charge that unit. And they know if they charge the unit, maybe they kill the unit, but then maybe next turn their models die. So sometimes it's really important to kind of give your opponent some options and, more likely to make a bad choice there. So you really want to be considering what your opponent's doing and why he's coming to certain places. And I think the more that you start thinking about that, the more you'll start to uncover some little secrets in the game where you're like, oh, right, I see why he's doing that. He wants me to do this. Well, I'm not going to fall for that. That honestly, how many times you just got to think for yourself? How many times are you playing a game where you're like, I hope he doesn't notice that because I really want to do this next turn? Every turn, every game, there's always something like that going on. And if you knew that, if your opponent was like, oh, by the way, just to let you know, I'm doing this here because I want to do that next turn, you'd be like,
forgot that model was over there, or you forgot that I've got the stratagem.
Like a great example for me, I had a game just recently against my friend Vic, and I had some Zangors in the middle of the field, and he was playing like a hero hammer list, like very much like a Jim Vessel kind of style list. So he had all these plague bearers and all these characters and bloodletters and everything, and Zangors. And what he managed to do very cleverly, very intelligently, is that he charged up the board, he dropped everything at deep strike, but he had everything pinned around the center unit. So in the center of the board, I had a squad of Zangors, there's about 6 left, and he had every one of his units some way wrapped up with that Zangor, so I couldn't shoot him. So he finishes his turn and he goes, great, everything's in combat with the Zangors, so you can't shoot it. And I was like, yeah, that's really bad. I'm going to Dark Matter Crystal my Zangors, so now they're out of combat, and all of a sudden I can shoot them. Because I knew that was what he was going to do, was to try and wrap the Zangor unit. So I had a counterploy. I let him wrap the Zangor unit. I knew what his game plan was. I let him do his game plan, and I had a perfect counter to it. Completely nullified it. So really take the time at the end of your turn when your opponent's doing his movement phase or whatever, to just be thinking, why is he going there? What's he planning? What's he going to try and do? Yeah. And one piece of advice...
hold on. Lewis, you sound really clever doing that, but I did that trick to you a couple of weeks before. To be fair, we were very drunk.
Did, yeah.
We were very drunk at the time, and he tried to wrap his Zangors around my Death Watch squad, and they beaconed away.
I knew I got it from somewhere. There's no new ideas. Who did you get it off?
And then your face at the time, you're just like, oh.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a good tactic. Just the one thing I like to do, we're going to cover this in my series a little bit further as we get into the How to Be Better 40k series, but is go around the other side of the table. That's such a useful thing to do. Sometimes you have to do it because you're doing like finicky stuff in their back lines of like combat and things like that. But I tell you what, just walking around their side of the table and looking at how they look at the battlefield, it completely changes your perspective on something. So as a takeaway from this, just to start yourself thinking about your opponent, see if you can't find a chance just to walk around there and just see what it looks like from his side of the table. You'd be very surprised how that changes your idea about what you should be doing and what's important.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive, that is.
Yeah.
Right, buddy. So we've got a bonus one.
We've got a bonus one because I think that is 5. That's 5 solid ones. Just to recap, because obviously we've gone through quite a lot there, and those are really catch-all terms that cover a lot. You know, we could even do a video on every single one of those. But just to recap, so we started with not playing the mission. You know, we're talking again to recap properly. 5 mistakes that you make that are holding you back from being a better player. So number 1 is not playing the mission. Number 2 is screening and deep strike screening, not screening properly. Number 3 is not being precise with what you're doing and really playing by intent because you intend to do that, not just because you happen to be there and you're playing reactively. Number 4 is mitigating chance as much as possible, mitigating the dice rolls that are going to be in the game, mitigating the risks that you're taking, not playing over aggressive and not playing high risk, high reward. And then number 5 is not considering your opponent and their plan and what they're trying to do. So I think that wraps it up. But one thing that we weren't sure if we were to squeeze it in, but I think we have to put it in here as a bonus one because this to me is again, you know, a hallmark of a player that really could improve, that's holding themselves back, and that is just don't give up. Don't give up just because you might die turn 1. Don't give up just because you really needed a 9-inch charge and you rolled a 6 and you think that was the most important thing in the game. The moment that you give up, you've lost the game. And you know, people take a lot of these high risk, high reward because they feel like they've got no choice because they've given up. Don't give up. It's just a dice game. You have some bad dice and you have some good dice, and one turn will go really bad, and the next turn will go really well, and all of a sudden you find yourself back in the game. It's really important just to keep a solid head. There's always a way to win a game. You know, if it wasn't dice, if there was no random element to it, then yeah, sometimes you just cannot pull the game back. But there's always the chance that your opponent could have 25 Las cannons shooting a one wound rhino and roll 25 ones and then re-roll them and roll 25 ones again. It could happen. You know, you play the lottery each week because you think you got a chance of winning that. I tell you, got a hell of a lot higher chance of doing that than you have of winning the lottery. So yeah, just don't give up. Basically, keep playing, keep finding a way to win. Yeah, no, that's good. So guys, let us know what you think about our top 5 here. Let us know what you think your top mistakes that you see people make are. And all the ones that you make yourself. Yeah, that's the easiest way is to look at your own mistakes first. Yeah. I mean, these 5 have mostly come from us talking about the mistakes we make. It's just in my last game, yeah. Exactly. We had to whittle a very long list down. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Andy. It was a really good video, and as we say always, if you like the content, check out our other videos. Each one of these things we either have gone into a lot more detail or we will continue to do so make sure you subscribe to get the regular updates, and catch you later. Yeah, see ya. Bye.